My name is Sheila Horton, and I'm a kindness revolutionary. The kindness movement started somewhere around 1982 when writer and peace activist Ann Herbert walked into a restaurant to have lunch. Just before she finished in Sausalito restaurant, she scrawled across the placemat, practiced random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty, and left it for the next hungry person to come in to read. That started a ripple effect that is now called the kindness movement. She certainly wasn't the first to have such a revolutionary idea. William Penn, the English Quaker leader and the founder of Pennsylvania, said, "I expect to pass through this way but once. If there's any kindness I can show, or any good thing I can do to any fellow being, let me do it now and not deter or neglect it, for I will never pass this way again." Martin Luther King and President Lincoln also shared his ideals on kindness and used that form of meekness to combat the civil rights issues of their time. It's obviously not weakness that is used to combat violence and war, hate. It's actually, meekness is actually the only weapon that we have in that prospect. Here in Burleson we have a motto, kindness matters. And I'm not sure that all of us really know what that means. Random acts of kindness do make a difference in everyday life. And I ask you to please join me today as we look at the aspects of violence and kindness on our world. Early in the morning of April 20th, 1999, two young men left their homes to go to high school, and it was no ordinary day. They had planned meticulously and gathered with them automatic, semi-automatic, and handheld weapons on the way out the door. They united together to target the national champion athletes and take out as many other students as possible because they had been driven to the edge, according to their logs, by the routine harassment and daily public humiliation that they had suffered at their hands. And they felt ignored and unprotected by the school administration. Ralph Larkin later, whenever he went to understand why, he wrote and did some research on the subject. He said that Harris and Keebold hoped that their act would generate a massive revolt, and that one of the videotapes found after their death, Harris said, "We're going to kickstart a revolution among the dispossessed and despised students of the world." With them that day they had two bombs that they had made out of gasoline and propane and store-bought igniters. They put them under the tables where the athletes sat in the cafeteria. And then they positioned themselves at the top of the courtyard outside in a crossfire formation so that they would not injure each other as they picked off every student and teacher that ran out of the building after the explosion. Once they realized that the bombs were not going to detonate, they nodded at each other across the courtyard and came down the hill, finding Rachel Scott at the bottom of the courtyard, shot her and her friend there, and into the building they went, shooting everyone they saw for the next 45 minutes until they finally turned the guns on themselves. They left a lot of people asking why. Their acts resonated among students across the country. Thousands of bomb scares were called in the few months that followed. Scores of attempted bombings happened in schools across the country, and also several attempted copycat killings were investigated. We all want to know why. The simple fact is because the bullies were bigger in more than one sense of the word, and they felt that there was no one looking in to help them. Some say that these victims, particularly these two in the Columbine tragedy, were not just acting because they were bullied, but they had some other issues that were going on for them. And that the behavior of those national champion athletes were not necessarily unpopular among high school students across the country. And that's true, unfortunately. That is exactly what happens in high schools. But John Pierce and Ann Thompson have a different idea about the former part of that statement. That bullying does have a significant and a long-term adverse effect on the health and the behavior of children. That not only does the victim suffer psychological and possibly physical damage, but persistent bullies are also at risk of continuing their behavior and their aggression long into their lives. D.P. Farrington defines, he wrote for Crime Justice an article that's called Understanding and Preventing Bullying. Bullying is defined in his perspective as a repeated oppression, psychological or physical, of a less powerful person by a more powerful person. He generalized that bullies are aggressive and tough and strong and confident and impulsive, where victims are unpopular and lonely, rejected and anxious, depressed, unwilling to retaliate, and lacking in self-esteem. D. Markova and D.R. Kingma are authors of Random Acts of Kindness in 2002. And they wrote that if violence and aggression are a part of our human nature, then the opposite must also be true. We just forget. We're reminded many times a day of the darkest shadows that we cast, but we need to also be reminded of the brilliant light that we're capable of igniting. They describe two different kinds of giving: the kind that expects something in return, and the kind that comes from a well of compassion expecting no reciprocation. And they say that giving in this way is as effective as an antidepressant. It is a positive contagion to counterbalance the negative contagion that's all around us. Once you begin to perform and acknowledge random acts of kindness, you can no longer believe that what you do does not matter. When last we spoke, I introduced you to a beautiful woman named Elise Boulding. She was a peace activist for all of her life. And she taught many across the country that action in the pursuit of peace was what we should be doing. Shunning the idea that passivism and pacifism are the same. That meekness is an unyielding in the face of violence and a peaceful opposition to those who seek their own interest at the expense of our peace. The absolute power of peace and the acts of kindness to overcome violence and war were what she believed in the most, and so do I. There will always be scientific pessimism about bullying and about the effects of our ability to create short-term happiness in our own lives or in the lives of people around us. But Sheldon Limbaum-Ersky did a study with two groups of students. The first student group was a control group where they were asked to be grateful and to concentrate on that during the week. At the end of the week, to log a representation of their happiness, how they felt, their well-being and wellness. The other group was given the same instruction about the log, but they were told to do 5 random acts of kindness a week. And the results proved that support the hypothesis that the short-term happiness enhancing activity, the random act of kindness, can increase well-being and boost happiness over the 6 weeks. And the experiment group had significant increases and held through the full 6-week study. The students that were in the control group did not have the same, and as a matter of fact, their numbers decreased. We don't know for sure if their happiness level stayed long after the 6 weeks, but I know that if they're still practicing random acts of kindness, it did endure. Darrell Scott is the author of Chain Reaction, A Call to Compassionate Revolution, and the father of Rachel Scott. And he was quoted as saying that Rachel Scott and Eric Holt Harris both talked about starting a chain reaction. Eric used the violence to control and destroy Columbine High School, but Rachel chose another path. In a personal creed she wrote just 1 month before her death in the Columbine tragedy, she explained her conviction that if one person goes out of his or her way to show compassion, it will start a world-changing chain reaction of kindness. In 2003, I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Scott in person. He was the keynote speaker at Keller ISD's staff assembly. And it was quite difficult to listen to a father detail the murder of his daughter. But I was also deeply inspired at his determination to spread her message and to spur on this kindness movement with her memory. I still am inspired today by the Scott family, and so is a score of other people. Miss Bryant is one of those, and her name is Justina Bryant. She's a professional and a mother of a student at Rio Del Mar Elementary School. Random Acts of Kindness was founded by her because she witnessed an incident on a playground where a group of students were antagonizing another student and to the point of tears, and sent him from the property to the other side of the street to sit. At that time, there was no faculty member on the playground, and she went first to intervene with the group of kids and then over to the student to bring him back to the group. That moment haunted her until she went back to the school and decided she was going to start a club. That first month, there were 15 members, which is only a small fraction of the 600 students that are in the school. But already there is a ripple effect of kindness moving through their culture. The student leaders of that club, launched a 21-day challenge with their message, "Flip the bullying by reacting with kindness." Just minutes after the student assembly that they had, a 10-year-old student was on the playground and witnessed a scene much like the one that Miss Bryant had witnessed. And she had the courage to approach that group of kids and intervene herself. Peer-to-peer intervention has much more of an impact than a parent or a student, teacher, or anyone else trying to intervene. That is the proof that random acts of kindness build confidence in a student. The impacts of random acts of kindness are personal, interpersonal, and community-wide in exactly the same ways that impacts of violence and destruction are. It's been proven that we have the ability to produce happiness and wellness in our lives, and the influence of happiness and wellness in those around us. So, how can we get involved? The Random Acts of Kindness Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization at the heart of the kindness movement. They provide a solid platform using media, education, community, social networking, and entertainment to give access to inspirational tools, resources, and a larger network of revolutionaries. I issue you my challenge today to become active in pursuing peace in your own life, to show compassion by completing 5 random acts of kindness every single week for the rest of your lives. Harrison Keybold hoped to start a revolution, a violent revolution that did, in fact, last several months after they died. Rachel Scott contributed to a kindness revolution that is continuing to ripple even to this day. Please visit www.randomactofkindness.org and see if there's some way that you can get involved. They are a free organization. They receive no membership fees, privately funded and held. There are no religious or organizational affiliations, and they believe that everyone should have their own impact, have their own say in how they get involved. Wage peace and use random acts of violence. Wage peace and use random acts of kindness to revolutionize your world. Thank you.